Welcome to No Going Back, keeping the rhythms and habits of faith and family. These past few weeks have been unprecedented. They've been unlike anything that we have ever experienced in our lifetime. And even as we talk about starting to open things back up or returning to normal, I think most of us realize that we've got a long road ahead of us to get back to whatever the new normal is going to be on the other side of life after quarantine. Over the past few weeks, I want you to know that we've been praying for you, and we've been praying for you in specific ways. First of all, we recognize that for many of you, the past few weeks have really been kind of a struggle. We've lost jobs, we've lost incomes, there have been anxieties that have been caused by life under quarantine, and there's a lot of us who've just been overwhelmed by all the things that we've had to do while we've been at home. And I want you to know that we've really been praying for you that Christ's peace and his comfort and his grace would be so present with you and so evident to you, and that Christ would be walking with you and helping you endure the things that are in front of you. On the other side of that, we also recognize that there are many of you who are so used to being busy, and your routines and your schedules just keep you going all the time, and you've been forced into a complete shutdown or slowdown to where you've had more free time on your hands than you've known what to do with. Our prayer for you has been that during this time of Sabbath or even sabbatical, would be a time where God's presence would be so clear to you, and that you would use that time as an opportunity to grow in your faith and enjoy the rest that he's provided for you to maybe slow you down for a purpose. Above everything else, our prayer has been that no matter where we've been during this process, that we would grow in our love for, our obedience to, and really our desire to know Christ more, and that he would form his character and his image in us in new ways. We wanted to take a few sessions, in fact 3 sessions. We wanted to spend with you helping your D group or maybe even your family begin to have a conversation about what life might look like on the other side of quarantine. In fact, maybe even what life could or should look like on the other side of quarantine. To do that, I want you to think about the Israelites back in the Old Testament, particularly around the time of the Judges. If you're familiar with that time, you'll remember that they would go through this continuous cycle where the Israelites would be obedient to God for a while, and then they would become very disobedient to him, and he would warn them, and they wouldn't change their ways, and so he would punish them. And they would cry out to God because they were being punished, and in his love and mercy, he would forgive them, and they would go back to being obedient and start the cycle all over again. Well, after hundreds of years of doing this, God finally punished Israel by allowing them to go into captivity for 70 years in Babylon. And during that time in captivity, they once again cried out to God, and he heard them, and in his love and in his mercy, he forgave them, and he allowed them to return back to their homeland. When they returned, there were 2 types of people who returned. There were those who, very few of them, but they were old enough to where they had been born, and they remembered their time in Israel. And when they returned, they were returning to a land that was somewhat familiar. But there were also a lot of people who were born in captivity that had only heard the stories of Israel, and when they returned, they were returning to a land that was foreign. On the other side of this quarantine, I think that that's what's going to happen to us, that we're going to emerge into a new life that is both familiar and foreign all at the same time. Those exiles returned home in 3 different waves. And when they returned home, there were 3 different things that they focused on under the leadership of Zerubbabel, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Those 3 things were this. They first focused on rebuilding the temple. They focused on spiritual things first, getting those things right. After a while, they began to focus on rebuilding their homes, the places that they would live, where their families would be. And then third, they refocused on rebuilding the walls around Jerusalem. They focused on doing the things it took to strengthen their community that they would be living in. Well, for many of us, it probably feels like we've spent the last 2 months in exile. And now as we face a new future together, we hope that like the Israelites, that we will do more than just return to life as we once knew it. As the busyness of the outside life of our homes, as it kept us busy with things like work activities and sports activities and after-work events and hobbies and school activities and all those things that filled our time. Good things, not bad things. Those things that fill our lives, as we think about them, we want to ask a couple of questions. One, we want to ask the question, what are the things that we need to add back into our lives? But on the other hand, we might want to add, what are the things that we need to leave maybe on the table and not be so quick to add back into our lives? A third question we might even want to ask is, what are the things that we've been doing during the quarantine that we've really enjoyed that we might want to keep as a part of our new rhythms and our new habits? To do that, I want to give you three things that I believe right now are opportunities that are in front of us and some things worth considering. The first thing is this. Now is a great time to make a change in our rhythms and habits. Think about the opportunity that's in front of us. Now is a great time for us to change our rhythms and our habits. I know a lot of us are probably thinking, I can't wait until things get back to normal. But before we go just charging back into the schedules and routines that we've always had before quarantine, I want us to recognize that opportunity that's in front of us. We can take all the things that filled our lives before and we can put them out in front of us. And now that we've gotten off that hamster wheel that life can sometimes bring, we can examine the things that have filled our lives through the lens of our faith and through the lens of our priorities. You may never have another opportunity like this in front of you to make this kind of a drastic change. And I know that our family has been in a season of life where before quarantine, simply getting home before bedtime on any given night was an absolute rarity. And we have loved our long evenings together that we've had as a family over the past few weeks. Our old schedule is not something that we are looking to jump back into. Think about that opportunity that's in front of us. Now is a great time to change our habits and our rhythms. Second thing I want you to recognize, the second opportunity is this. Now is a great time to either add or continue those things in your life that make you closer to Christ. Now is a great time for us to either add or keep the things we've been doing that make us closer to Christ. Have you been more of a person of prayer during this time of health crisis? Have you been reading your Bible more? Maybe after the worship services and the sermons on Sundays, you as a family have had more time to sit around and talk about what you just heard together because you're not having to rush off to lunch. Have you been having more conversations about meaningful things with people? Have you been reading more? When you take a look over the past few weeks, I want you to ask yourself the question, what have I done that has been drawing me closer to Christ? Take some time and think about how you can keep those things in your life. I know for me, I've simply not had as much time in the car going back and forth to the office or shuttling kids around to school activities or sports practices or things like that. And what I've been able to do in that time is to add in a couple of things. One, I've been connecting with more people than I have in a long time through text messages and phone calls and things like that. And what that's done for me is I've been talking with them about the things they've been doing, is I've heard how God is at work in their life, and I've heard about how their faith is being built, and that in turn builds my faith as I see how God is working. Second thing it's allowed me to do is I've actually been reading more. I love to read, and that is one of the first things that always goes when my schedule gets crowded. I've been able to read things that have fed my heart and fed my soul and fed my mind, and I'm always a better dad, a better husband, a better pastor, a better leader when I'm feeding my heart and my soul and my mind with books that challenge me and help me grow. That's something that I am certain I'm going to fight to keep in my life on the other side of quarantine, because I can sense how God has been using it in my life during this time. Now is a great time to add or keep the things that draw us closer to Christ. So what might that look like in your life? The third thing is this. Now is a great time to add or continue the things that have drawn you closer to your spouse, to your family, and to your friends. What are the things that you've done in quarantine over the past few weeks that have drawn you closer to your spouse, to your family, or to your friends? I've got 3 sons, and our oldest is a sophomore in high school this year, and it is not lost on me that he has just a couple of years left in our home. And I've been so grateful for the extra time that we've been given these past few weeks to spend with him and really to spend with my entire family. We've been having dinners around the table almost every night. We've watched shows and movies together that we've loved. We've been going for walks around the neighborhood. We've been going for hikes on the weekends. It's been fantastic. I love my wife. And in the busyness of our schedule, we don't always get the time together that we want. And so we've been able to talk more. Even though we're both at home and we're both working, we've been able to eat lunch together most days, and we've been able to have a lot of conversations on those walks around the neighborhood in the evening. This has been a great time the past few weeks for just that life on life time together that has led to those discipleship moments that come when you're together as a family. And I mean it, it's not something that we're looking to jump back into our old schedule uncritically. We have loved this time together, and I want all of those things to stay a part of the rhythms and habits of our family as we move forward. And so, what do you want to add, or what do you want to keep in your life that has drawn you closer to your spouse, to your family, and to your friends? Those are good things to think through. Well, as we continue the conversation, I want you to listen to Matt Morgan, who is our Fellowship Kids pastor for all of our Fellowship campuses. And I want you to listen to how he shares how we can lead the children that are in our lives to adopt to the changes that are coming as well. Matt?
Thanks, Jay. Parents, what a wild couple of months it has been. I know that we're all ready to return to normal, but Jay has given us such a challenge to think about what our return will and will not look like for us. You know, as much of an upheaval of life that this pandemic has caused, it's also uncovered a great opportunity for us as parents. As everything that we were involved in, from work to school, sports, and even just the comfort of going out and entertaining ourselves was taken away, we suddenly had lots and lots, and I mean lots, of time with our kids. And while many of us were working from home, we also became their school teacher, their coach, their IT department, their chef, their housekeeper, their violin tutor. Oh, and we were still mom and dad too. You know, this was just a stark reminder that I am the primary leader in my child's life. I love all the people who have invested in my daughters and helped us along the way. But when all else is taken away, these children are God's gift to me, and He's given me the responsibility to lead them. And the ultimate responsibility is to lead them to know and to love Him. So Fellowship Kids loves the opportunities that we get to tell your kids about Jesus. But what happens when Sundays are gone? So here's the question that I'd love for us to wrestle with. If Sundays never returned, and my home was the center of discipleship, am I confident that my kids would come to know Jesus and follow Him passionately? Listen, as your kids pastor, I just want to say that question gives me the sweats. I mean, ultimately, my child knowing and trusting in Jesus is a work of the Holy Spirit. But if He had primed their hearts to believe, would they hear the gospel of Jesus from me? Would they see what it means to follow Jesus from watching me? That's a tough question. You know, hopefully we'll gather together on Sundays again real soon. But let's not miss the lessons that I think God can teach us from the season we're in. There are two things that I want to point out. One thing that I'm being reminded of is that I am the primary discipler of my children. As much as we joke about the responsibilities that we've taken on in the last 2 months, we all accept the fact that they are our responsibilities. At the end of the day, we know that we will always be the greatest influence in the life of our child. And we all desire to see our kids grow in the faith, but discipleship takes time and it takes intentionality. So before we go back to a schedule that's packed full of activities for our kids, we need to think about where can we make time to share Jesus with our kids. And we need to have a plan for how we will share Jesus with our kids. So a couple of things. Number one, prioritize time for your children to read the Bible, both alone and as a family. And give them some opportunities to ask questions or share with you what they're learning from their time in the Word. And then also, I love the verse from Psalm 78, verse 4. It says, "We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, His power, and the wonders He has done." So think about where in your schedule that you will create unbreakable time to talk with your kids about the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord and how He has been faithful to your family. You know, maybe it's once a week at the dinner table when you just share stories or prayers of thankfulness for what God has done that week. Invest the time and be intentional, because the truth is you are the primary discipler of your children. Now, if there's another thing that our role as COVID-19 parents has taught us, it's this. It can be overwhelming, and we will all need some help. I can tell you, I've struggled. I don't know what I was doing. I would have given an arm and a leg to have a math tutor come over and help my third grader with her math work. If I see another fraction, I may cry. I was desperate for some help with third grade math. As we turn back to our lives, the truth is, when we go to disciple our children, there are going to be moments where we feel overwhelmed and we need some help. First and foremost, I would remind us all that the Holy Spirit is with us and interceding for us in this task. Secondly, I would remind us that God has given us community. As we plan for post-quarantine life, we can't ignore our need for connection and community. If we go back to a schedule of good things that take us away from the faith community that God has provided, then those good things are really just sinful things, because they've become idols that feed our selfishness and our comfort, but they remove us from the community that God has given us. So we can't go back to a schedule that's full of good things that cause us to miss out on the best thing. So as parents, we need to prioritize attending church so that we can be connected to the body who encourages us and who needs our encouragement. We also need to prioritize our D group so that our kids can see what it looks like to be in community and share life with other followers of Jesus. And please, make Fellowship Kids a priority for your kids so that they can hear the message of the gospel every Sunday in a small group of their peers and with other trusted adults. God has given us community to help us in the task of discipling our kids. So let's not neglect that community and miss out on the help that He wants to provide through them. Our kids are a huge blessing and a huge responsibility. But the same God who blessed us with these kids will strengthen us to raise them. So I'm praying with you as we think about how we might be better disciplers of our kids in the days ahead. And most of all, I pray that your kids will know Jesus and that they'll come to treasure Him above everything else.
Well, thanks for joining us today for No Going Back, keeping the rhythms and habits of faith and family. We've talked today about life in our homes and how it might change coming out of quarantine. And I hope you'll join us for the next 2 weeks as we talk about what it looks like to re-engage with our spiritual practices through our church, and also how we can re-engage with the needs in our community. And as we wrap up our time together today, I want to give you a couple of questions that you and your D group or you and your family can discuss. Here are those questions. The first one is this: our baskets of life have been emptied out for the past few weeks. What has God been putting on your heart to maybe leave out of your basket when all of this is finished? And the second one is this: what changes have you seen in your relationships, in your home, or with your friends? What do you hope lasts out of those relationships from the past few weeks? Well, thanks again for being with us today. I hope you enjoy that conversation. We'll see you again next week.